Thanks to everyone who has joined us for our presentation today. My name is Sharon Welch, and I'm the Executive Director of Forward House Community Society, offering day programs for community members experiencing mental health or addiction challenges. And I'm also a member of OWN's Circle of Partners and the Child and Youth Wellness Action Group. The Oceanside Health and Wellness Network has been serving Oceanside since 2013 to look at upstream solutions to community health and wellness challenges. Our Child and Youth Wellness Action Group is comprised of a variety of individuals and organizations who have come together to look at strategies for promoting healthy infants, children, youth, and families through a lens of trauma-informed practice. We hope you will enjoy our presentation and engage fully in the discussion to help us foster resilience by mutually supporting one another through the COVID storm. This pandemic has taken a huge toll on all of us, and now we have an opportunity to hold each other up and come through the storm together. I'd like to introduce you to my co-presenters, Rosalinda Bose from Oceanside Child and Youth Mental Health Team. She's the lead and member of the Child and Youth Wellness Action Group. And then Karen Byrne, retired psychiatrist and member of the Child and Youth Wellness Action Group. The formal presentation segment will be recorded, but only the slides and the speakers will be recorded. No other participants nor the small group discussions will be recorded. The recorded presentation will then be available on the OWN website. In addition, if anyone wishes, the slides will be available on request from Jane Vanette, our OWN coordinator. Please put yourself on mute during the presentation. Next slide. Here's today's agenda. We're going to be talking about topics that may create feelings of stress as you consider the information. This is normal, and our goal is to provide a supportive avenue to explore our thoughts and feelings safely. But if you feel that you need further support, please call the Vancouver Island Crisis Line at 1-888-494-3888. If you have any trouble accessing the phone line, please try again. You can also call 811 for healthcare assistance. I'll give you the crisis line number once more, 1-888-494-3888. We will also provide additional support and resources through online links at the end of our time together today. Over to you, Rosalinda.
Thank you, Sharon. Welcome, everyone. I'm presenting this mental health continuum model, which is used by a number of frontline responder organizations, including the Canadian Armed Forces. And it is a good way to look at it is as a framework or a type of a ruler to help us assess where we are in terms of our mental health. From green to red, or on a scale of 1 to 4, or from worst to best. So kind of helps us take stock of where we are in that respect. In terms of the green category or the healthy category, in this zone, we're going to be, managing for the most part. We're going to have some fluctuations in mood and stress level. We have good energy, good concentration. We're going to be a little bit more flexible when we do experience stress, having a bit of up and down, but typically balancing back to sort of our middle stable zone, and we're able to kind of function and manage. As we move through the yellow and orange or reacting and injured category, we're going to be experiencing more stress. We're going to have lower energy, more difficulty concentrating, difficulty with sleep and eating, having more sadness. more anxiety, missing occasional work or school. But again, we're sort of managing. And then in terms of moving to the extreme end or the ill category, this is where everything is to the max. Extreme mood and anxiety that's more incapacitating, withdrawal, more isolation. We're not able to go to work or school, and physically we're being impacted. Sleep is difficult. And typically it's going to have gone on for quite some time already. And at this stage, we're maybe going to hear things, especially in a work context, like burnout or vicarious or secondary trauma, if you're working on the front lines especially. Interesting with this model that they've added the dimension of a sense of humor and really seeing that as more of a protective factor, and then also consuming alcohol as more of a risk factor. The nice part about the model is on the bottom, we see the actions that we can take at the various stages, and from the green zone being more natural supports, using kind of more problem solving, working on solutions. And then as we move into the red, we're going to have difficulty doing it on our own. We're going to need more formal or professional type help at the extreme end. And again, this just gives us an opportunity to take stock of where we are. And there's going to be fluctuations from day to day and month to month. And also you might struggle more in one area than the other, and that's normal. And so really, I just propose for you to think about where you feel like you are at this moment, and then even reflecting back where you were at the beginning of the pandemic, and as lockdowns happened and then lifted and then locked again. And then when the vaccines came in, and then with the Delta, all these changes that we've had, like how have you managed through the course of this time? So keep that in mind, and we'll have more opportunity to explore that. Next.
So it's Karen taking over for a couple of slides, and then Rosalinda will continue. This slide is really showing the potential effects of stress on body, mind, emotions, and behavior. And a lot of you will be aware of things that occur to yourself or to others when you're feeling in a stress response. In terms of body, you may be having headaches, you may be feeling you're taking more deep breaths or having trouble getting your breath. In terms of emotions, you may feel somewhat irritable. You may be worrying more in your mind, and your behaviors, you may end up just not paying enough attention, being more accident prone, perhaps smoking more, using more alcohol. But to feel stress, there must be stressors, and some potential threats or stressors may activate a full body stress response. And stressors can be anything that you see, hear, smell, touch, taste, or imagine could do you harm. And stressors can be external: work, school, money, family, bullying, threats of or actual abuse, harassment, and COVID. Or stressors can be internal. They can be self-criticism, body image, thoughts and negative thoughts, memories, the future, fear of failure, and also thoughts and worries about COVID. COVID is pretty much a universal stressor at this point, and has been for the past many months. But as Rosalinda said, it can be different intensity depending on individual circumstances and what's occurring around you. And this has likely changed up and down like a roller coaster over the last 20 months. It's really important to understand that reactions to different stressors is very much an individual thing. What triggers or upsets one person may not bother someone else, or only minimally. So it's important that we respect, I guess, what other people are responding to in terms of their stress, and for yourself to respect your stress. If everyone's saying, oh, that's nothing, but to you it is, then it is, and it's really important. The stress response, it's not all bad. It's an adaptive evolutionary response to protect ourselves. But a prolonged or chronic stress response can affect our physical and or mental health. Next slide, Jane, thanks. So the stress response is a biological shift in your body and your mind when faced with a stressor or threat. And as I said, it's a whole body response. A lot of you will know about flight, fight, or freeze. And during these triggering events, our body reacts quickly with an increase in adrenaline, and that brings increase in your heart rate and breathing. We become more alert, vigilant. We're ready for the threat. It can also produce a shutdown or freeze response in us that can also be protective. Freeze, flight, fight is an automatic response for protection. We don't really control it in our cognitive mind. It's based and reacts in the ancient or reptilian part of our brain, which is at the back, the brainstem and the cerebellum, but you don't need to know exactly where it is, but it's deep in there, and it's been there through evolution. We share it with many, many other animals. If there's a visible threat like a cougar, then our brain will react in this way, and it makes sense. If you see a cougar, you're going to want to, have your adrenaline pumping and feel like you're either going to take off, put your hands up, make a lot of noise, but be there and vigilant and really alert. But if the stressor is a fearful thought or a memory, but your body's reacting as if you're run into a cougar, it can be very confusing. And sometimes people really wonder if they're losing it when they feel that way, when there's nothing visible going on. You can also get stuck in the middle of a stress response. Your body response can become chronic, as I mentioned, and you may have a constant higher level of adrenaline and the other associated body responses. And this can lead over time to problems both with physical and mental health. Learning about the stress response and your own stress response is really important, and learning what works for you to decrease it and end it if there's a stress cycle going on will help you feel more in control and less fearful. Terms like stress and anxiety are often used interchangeably, but they are different and are part of a continuum. Chronic stress may develop into anxiety and or depression. Rosalind is going to talk more specifically about anxiety and depression. Next slide.
All right. So we are focusing on anxiety and depression because they really are the most common mental health concerns. This triangle highlights how anxiety is really more than just worried thoughts, which is what comes to mind usually when we say the word anxiety. As Karen explained, it also includes the physical body reactions and as resulting behavior that we see in that fight or flight. And it also is connected to these anxious feelings of which are, fear or apprehension, and sometimes anger or sadness as well. And understanding how these three interact, the emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, how they all play off of each other and influence each other. Understanding that interaction, it helps us to have some clues about where we might want to make some changes. Anxiety is a common human experience. As Karen said, we are all responding in a perceived threat or real threat. It's a normal response, and it motivates us to get things done and to keep us safe. It's typically about things in the past or things in the future, that ruminating, oh, what did I do? I should have done that. Or, what's going to happen? Those sorts of things. And it also is commonly about fear of death, is often if you drill down into what's driving it, or fear of losing control. So understanding what might be driving it is helpful. It is, with COVID, it certainly amplified some of these aspects because the risks are real, and that's what makes it harder when to really understand how part of it is valid. We are justified in having that fear, and of becoming more ill, and also the parts around with having the public health measures in impacting us, that sense of losing control is really has been amplified. It's a biological response. So a little bit of what Karen said, what happens in the body is when we're getting ready for that fight or flight, the blood rushes to the areas where our body needs that energy and that ability to respond, and so we have our blood going to the heart, and we feel that in the chest pounding and maybe difficulty breathing, and the blood leaves the areas of the body where it's not needed, like digestion. So that often it can explain why people experience butterflies or nauseousness when they have anxiety, and certainly everybody experiences these three different parts differently, and even within yourself you might in one circumstances get caught up more in faulty thinking and in irrational thoughts, whereas in other situations it might be more you're going to withdraw, and it's that shutdown maybe. So understanding how you respond in what situations is helpful. Anxiety is adaptive. Some of it's helpful. A little bit's good. It gets us motivated to get things done and to keep us safe. But too much is too big, and if it lasts too long, and if it impacts our functioning, where we're not able to go to sleep or eat or go to school, that's when it becomes a problem. Anxiety is uncomfortable. It is. I think everyone will agree. It's not always it's not a pleasant experience, but it typically won't hurt you, and it is there to keep you safe. So sometimes kind of coming alongside or befriending anxiety can be helpful. And it usually doesn't last forever. We can't, it was designed to keep us safe in an emergency. And our system really wasn't designed to stay up in that heightened state for a prolonged period of time. And that's what's made this especially challenging. And it explains why we're seeing more anxiety with COVID, because it has been prolonged, and so it's normal that we would be experiencing more anxiety than normal. The other tricky part about anxiety is that it's hard to see most often, especially for people that you maybe don't know well. Those you know well, you might be able to tell or have a clue that they're struggling. But because a lot of it is internal, and especially often in our thoughts, others might not see it. And then certainly with COVID, the restrictions and the isolation has meant that people have not been out and about and visible as much as they were pre-COVID. So that explains an increase as well. And the last point here is that, again, it becomes a problem when it's excessive and difficult to control. And really our mind and our body is sending out a false signal, like that tiger's not there anymore. And it tricks us to thinking that or the fire isn't there. And it tricks us to thinking that there is a fire. Again, the tricky part with COVID is that maybe there is a little bit of a fire. So we want to acknowledge that, yes, that's true, but recognize that anxiety and the nature of anxiety will likely tend to make it seem like it's more of an emergency than it is. So keeping that in mind, anxiety will exaggerate it, the danger for us. Next slide. So I ask you to think about what's your reaction when you saw this slide here. I know for me, like pre-COVID, that would have been fun. Right away, I can feel it in my gut. I can feel my heart putter a bit, and just envisioning being in that crowd, it's pretty scary right now, given what we're experiencing. And coming back to the triangle, let's say you're in there in that crowd and you heard someone cough. Right away your mind might go, oh my goodness, they got COVID, and your emotional response is fear, versus you hear the cough and you go, okay, well, it's cold season. There are definitely more people out there with sniffles and cough and even flu, and it's probably not COVID. And then your emotional response is likely more of an annoyance, and like maybe even a bit of irritation, like why would this person be out and about when they've got cold symptoms? So the point of that example is that really the hope and the work that we do to support people and what we can do for ourselves is really looking at our thoughts and our faulty thinking and our exaggerated thinking, that anxiety, that's the nature of it. And so there's a clue for help, the hope in changing our thoughts to change our behavior and change our feelings as a result. Next slide. So anxiety, as we've talked about here, it's the new normal. And who would have predicted where we were at 20 months ago, where at the beginning it really did feel like a sprint. It was like, okay, let's hurry up, we're all in it together. And then it's kind of, as the months went on and it dawned on us, like, this is not going away anytime soon. It feels more like a marathon. And again, it makes sense that people are struggling with the restrictions, the isolation, the lack of access to normal activities that are the self-care stuff that we need to be doing to help us stay healthy, not having those social interactions. And then, of course, like the job losses and actual illnesses and sicknesses, and then people working on the front lines, and even just like none of that, and just the general level of stress and fear that about the future. These are all normal reactions to an abnormal circumstance. So kind of acknowledging that and being kind to ourselves about that. For some, this change is new, and others that might have been struggling with anxiety already, it might have be more of the same, or in fact, some of our kids actually got better. Some of the kids who had social anxiety and it's hard to go out, we're quite happy to be at home. Of course, that changed as soon as they had to go back to school. So, and then definitely things worsened for a lot of us out there. The increasing uncertainty and continues, the seriousness of the risk, the rapid and the constant changes. It really explains why we're all struggling. And it highlights the struggles that we are having as individuals and as a society. And so the better analogy that I like, and I don't know if this is actually a thing, but a relay marathon. So we're in it for the marathon, but we're gonna take turns helping each other through, which is what I like about this slide here. Next slide, please. All right. So now we'll move on to talking about depression or low mood. One way to think about anxiety is as a too activated nervous system. So we talked about the fight or flight. We don't have, that's our nervous system responding to the threat. And in anxiety, it's typically too much. And in depression, it's too little. Sadness is kind of the low grade, normal, low mood. We see fluctuation, and especially in response to difficult stressors, like if you've had a loss or a death or a conflict, maybe, it's normal for us to have periods of low mood and reactivity to that. But typically we're going to come through it fairly quickly. Like anxiety, depression has the three parts of the triangle. So physically, usually there's more tiredness and lack of motivation, difficulty getting out of bed, getting off the couch. Mentally, difficulty concentrating, a negative mindset is a feature of depression. And emotionally, low mood, obviously, more irritability and anger. And that sometimes is kind of confusing because we don't necessarily think of anger as maybe coming from depression or low mood. So normal low mood in regard to sort of the sadness category, it usually will resolve itself within a few hours or, a few days, a few weeks, if it's a significant loss. But it doesn't usually last much longer than that. And it doesn't impact functioning as much as like the depression category. Like if you've had a loss, it's normal. You would maybe not be able to sleep for a few weeks even. But again, you're typically going to be able to kind of move back to normal within a reasonable period of time. In comparison, depression that's diagnosable is more excessive and it's more long-term or chronic. And it's typically been going on for a long period of time and really impacting functioning, difficulty going to school, even interacting with other people, that withdrawal. And it usually requires a medical intervention if it's at the really extreme end. So again, it's no surprise that we're seeing more low mood and depressive symptoms that people are experiencing. We are social beings. We live we're born, evolved in a context of relationship. And so that part of the isolation, the imposed restrictions, all the barriers that have come with COVID have really impacted people's ability to kind of recover from the low mood category. The no access to normal means of coping strategies. So again, not being able to go to the gym or, get out to exercise, and even like not being able to go for coffee with your neighbor. Like maybe you were lucky enough to meet your neighbor at the end of the driveway, but a lot of people just retreated to their homes and didn't come out for weeks. And so that those natural supports really were cut off during COVID. Going to the groceries, the masks, all the shields, like there's so many barriers that have impacted our ability to stay connected. So again, remembering that these things are fluid and it's a snapshot in time and they can change. And that's the hope, is that, we'll learn, have a look at where we're at and where we can make some changes. So, and again, these resources that I mentioned, are at the back. Anxiety Canada and Here to Help is all of this information comes from there. So thanks. Over to you, Karen.
Okay. Next slide, Jane. So these two concepts are, I think, another way to help you understand what may be happening to you or others around you. So here we have fatigue versus depletion. And continuing our track theme here, we have an athlete who we can just imagine has just given it all. And he's gasping on the track, and he definitely would be fatigued. And fatigue is when a muscle or the mind's been used almost to the point of failure. If you've seen people run the races and just collapse, and you feel tired. And fatigue requires rest and relaxation to recuperate, but you bounce back after adequate rest. And even after, a few minutes, an athlete who's gasping will dump water over his or her head, their head, get up, bounce around, especially if they've won, and do a victory lap. And that recovery is pretty quick. And fatigue affects body and mind, but you recover from it. Rest helps. Depletion, on the other hand, so I've chosen this empty milk bottle. Basically, your inner resources of energy have been drained. Shelves are empty, and the shelves are not going to be refilled unless something changes and something happens, or that bottle's not going to be okay after sitting there for 10 minutes. It's still going to be empty. Depletion may have no connection to exertion, and you can't rest yourself out of it. You can be depleted without feeling tired. You can be depleted of empathy, caring, or compassion. And I think COVID has really been a factor in making that depletion perhaps more likely to happen. We've all been trying our best for a long time. Feeling that nothing perhaps you do makes any difference. Depletion affects emotions and spirit as opposed to body and mind with fatigue. And I think depletion can sneak up on you. You may be just too busy to really notice what was happening because you were full out. You need restorative positive actions to add energy and to refill your inner stores. We may need to find new ways to restore ourselves or restock our inner shelves, if you want to go with that. Or you can go back to what used to work, but we'd forgotten about it. By actively restocking as we go along, we can prevent depletion, but you have to be aware of what might be happening. Meaningful activities such as walks, dips in the ocean, yoga, golfing, or hands-on hobbies can really help. And meaningful conversations and connections can help restock and restore ourselves. It doesn't have to be a lot every day, but it needs to be something every day. We'll be talking about what can help restock our depleting stores further into this presentation and in the small group discussions. Next slide. So Jane's going to queue up a very good video on empathy versus sympathy. And empathy is a word that's used a lot these days, and it may have been somewhat negative or feel somewhat negative sometimes. But empathy's restorative effects for yourself and for others are really worth noting and understanding. This video is a short video on empathy by Dr. Brené Brown, professor and podcaster trained in social work.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So empathy versus sympathy, as the bear and fox showed us, well, in the draft, sympathy is really about how we feel about others. And as Brené Brown says, it drives disconnection. It can be condescending sometimes too, I think. Empathy is about understanding how the other person feels. Empathy is temporarily putting aside our feelings and our needs. And you really have to sometimes work at putting those aside. Empathy is a skill. It takes time and practice to develop, and thought. Practice before you need to use it. And as the video said, it may mean we have to actually experience or hold on to feelings that may be uncomfortable and may even bring back some memories for ourselves. But that's to the side, and we have to focus on the person that's stuck or in that hole. Empathy does not mean you're condoning a problem behavior. For instance, someone may have gotten themselves into a financial fix, or is opting to use drugs or alcohol again, but they're really upset about it and they're really in distress. How we communicate is just as important as what we say. And as it said in the video, we learned that starting a sentence with "at least" in it is not going to lead you to empathy. Empathy fuels connection. Next slide. Right, good, that's great. Don't get into problem solving unless someone asks you. Empathy conveys, I see you, I'm here with you, I care. Even if you disagree with someone's views or ideas, if you're there for them, then you have to put that aside. Empathy can help both parties feel better, as can kindness. Empathy can make both parties feel less isolated, more connected. And that can help to restock us and prevent depletion. Empathy can produce some feel-good hormones like oxytocin. You get an inner reward, and that can really help. And the person that you're with can also feel similarly inside. In terms of empathy, we also have to think about ourselves, and don't forget about self-compassion or self-empathy. Notice and acknowledge your own distress or how difficult a situation is for you. Offer understanding and kindness to yourself rather than judging yourself harshly. Become aware of negative thoughts you direct to yourself and counter them with self-kindness. Give yourself a break, positive thought or an action. And remember, it's okay to take time for a meaningful connection with someone instead of dusting or doing the dishes. You can't do everything, and you have to find what restores you. And I think that restoration and restocking at times needs to take precedence, unless dusting restores you. If it does, then go for it. If you notice you're feeling badly about what you might have just said or did, you can think, what would I do differently next time, instead of being harsh on yourself. Give yourself credit for recognizing that source of distress. Like, take a moment and think about, why am I feeling badly now? And finding a solution, or even trying to find a solution to that, or just taking time to understand what happened, will fill you up rather than pull you down. Be a caring friend to yourself. There's a nice resource on self-compassion, again, in the resources at the end of the slides. Next slide. We're going to have our small group discussion, hopefully be interactive. Next slide. So we take a couple of minutes, if you've got pen and paper, look at the questions, maybe jot down your first thoughts for these questions before we go to the small breakout groups.
Thank you so much for sharing all those wonderful ideas. So we're on to the self-care wheel slide, and the wheel provides a holistic way to approach attending to areas where we could use improvement or have neglected ourselves. During the discussions, many of these things came up, and I just want to give you a moment to look over the wheel again, and then we'll talk further. Quite a few of these ideas came out of our discussion, and I love this wheel because it really covers the triangle. It covers the emotional piece, it covers the psychological piece, so mind and cognition. It covers the physical piece, your body, and other important aspects of professional or work, personal identity, social aspects, and spiritual. And I think that when we look at these things, this is how we can start to find some balance in our life. And I know that you've all considered various aspects of your health. And moving forward, these are some ideas of things that we can do. Physical things like getting safe housing, getting enough sleep, taking vacations, having massages. We talked in our group about how through COVID there's been such a lack of touch, and that for so many people that they just don't get that touch, and it's so important to us as human beings. The psychological piece, self-reflection, relaxing in the sun, practicing asking for and receiving help. I think especially I see a lot of you that are in the helping field, and I wonder how many times we think to ask for help for ourselves when we're so busy helping other people, and it's so important. The emotional piece, loving yourself, cuddling with your pet. I wish I had a pet to cuddle with. I think I want to get one. Looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, hey, you're gorgeous, right? Some of those things that just make us feel good. The spiritual pieces, meditating, doing an exercise like what Judy did earlier for us, playing, being inspired, playing piano, wonderful ways to just really connect to nature, connect to the world, connect to a higher being. Personal pieces, learn who you are, figure out what you want in life. I remember being young and having people say, I'm going to be a teacher, and then I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And these days it seems like things are so much more fluid, and you see people moving through multiple careers, and it's just so wonderful to see the possibilities in life. And the professional piece, taking time for lunch. I have to learn from this one. Taking time for lunch is important. Not working during your time off. Okay, I'm maybe a little guilty of that one too. Planning your next career. There you go. And taking a class, or taking some vacation days, and taking sick days when you need them. And I think we're learning to do that more in COVID because we've basically been forced to. So, so many things that we can do to achieve that life balance that we all need. We're creatures of habit. So if something's working for you, keep on doing it. And, some of us need or respond better to novelty. So think of something new that you can try. Learn a new instrument, or go out and try something you've never done before. Start small. Keep it simple. You can create a simple do list. So a do list might be, I'm going to start exercising. I'm going to start eating better. I'm going to go and buy that pet that I don't have and that I should have. And then a don't list. Don't judge myself when I do something that's not as good as what I hope to. Be kind to myself. Don't judge other people. So you can create some really simple lists just to get yourself going in baby steps. Structure it in. Practice, practice more, practice again, keep repeating. I was a piano student for many years, and boy, I heard all about practice, but you know what? When you get to where you're going, it sure was worth it, and it's a great way to live. And the key is finding balance or meaning, which includes being kind to yourself if you haven't done as well as you hope to, and just continuing on. So on our next couple of slides, I think there's 2 or 3 slides that are just a list of resources that we've tapped into for this presentation. And so we encourage you, if you get the presentation, to go through and look at these in more detail, because there's some real nuggets in them, and we hope that you can enjoy and learn and grow through those. I'll keep going, Jane, and we'll get to the next one. Next one. Here we go. One more. There we go. And so I really want to thank you so much for taking the time to attend this presentation today. We hope that you've learned some new things and know that none of us are alone in moving through this stormy time. And we really believe that together we can weather any storm. And so we hope that you'll all stay safe out there, and we'll continue to connect. So thank you so much for being here today.